Hi everyone, my name is Marcus Foth. I'm the chairperson of BFPCA, the Brisbane Flight Path Community Alliance. We've founded our group at the end of 2020 as a result of the excessive noise pollution that Brisbane communities have been experiencing. And there's been a lot of work since in terms of research and community building and advocacy. And I think Melbourne communities will be quite interested in some of the things that we've uncovered, especially because a lot of it is nationally relevant and also relevant to you guys in Melbourne. So I'm going to show you a couple of the things and just kind of scratching the surface, hopefully to whet some appetite for you guys to head on over to our website, where you can find out a little bit more about all the kinds of things that I think will open your eyes to what we're really up against. So this is our website here. It's bfpca.org.au. We're currently running a campaign that you're very happy to join because it's about complaints that we ask everyone to submit to the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, and specifically the aviation branch, about their failure to provide regulatory oversight over Air Services Australia. Air Services Australia is the organization that designs flight paths and is supposed to regulate and look after the safety and the protection of the community. But they've actually forgotten how to do that, and instead prioritizing the commercial gains and commercial interests of the aviation industry and specifically their partners at the airports. Now, we've created 60 reasons to protest in the lead up to our last protest in June, and I'm going to show you a couple of those. This is the page here. There's a 60 total. We will be adding more in the near future, but I'll just show you a couple that I think will be quite relevant to Melbourne communities. The first one down here is 59, which is about engagement theatre. A lot of the time, air services and also the airport will ask communities to engage in consultation. It's really important to understand what the actual remit is and the scope of influence. What can actually be changed? Have decisions already been made before people arrive at these engagement sessions? So are they really actually, in essence, engagement theatre? Here you can read out more about what we found. There's also a very interesting thesis, a research thesis from Utrecht University in the Netherlands that talks about the social engineering tactics of the aviation industry. Do check that out. 58. Did you know that aviation noise in Australia is entirely unregulated? So you can complain about construction noise next door, about a loud party, about a dog that's barking. Everything has some sort of regulatory framework at the local or the state government level, but aviation noise at the federal level is entirely unregulated. So there's also no basis for complaints. People can complain, but those complaints go nowhere, which is what we found here through freedom of information requests. And this is detailed here on this page 54. We've actually been able to request and receive the entire training manual of the Air Services Noise Compliance and Information Services team. And those compliance specialists, as they call themselves, are specifically trained to make us go away. Once complaints are received, they are logged, boilerplate responses are sent, and then eventually these cases are closed without any further investigation. And we've heard through the Senate estimates process that they actually confess to the fact that investigations have not been occurring into any kind of noise improvements suggested by the community, which is just entirely outrageous. Property valuations. The airport is at lots of pains to explain that apparently there is no property devaluations, but interestingly, we found that as part of the environmental impact statement for the Western Sydney Airport, JLL, a property consultancy, did find devaluations occurring in the major capitals. We've quoted here the figure for Brisbane, and JLL found there a property devaluation of 10.67%. So do check out this document and see what it says about Melbourne and what the devaluations are like there in Melbourne. Now, we've also been starting to do research on what impact the flight path noise has on children. And this is quite critical because a lot of schools, both primary and secondary, are under flight paths here in Brisbane, and that might be similar in Melbourne, not just with the current configuration, but also the third runway that is being planned there. And so that is quite a detrimental impact on the cognitive abilities of children. Their learning, their reading abilities have been decreased in peer-reviewed studies, and we've cited those studies. We've done a mapping here, but also you can see some of the articles cited on our page about children's learning. This one here is looking at the impact of aircraft noise on wildlife. It's not just humans that are affected, it is also birds, for instance. In this case, we are talking here about how they are adjusting and trying to cope with the increased aircraft noise pollution and adjusting the songs in order to find a mate. This is also an impact that extends to other wildlife, and you can read more about that on this page over here. Greenwashing. I think a lot of you down in Melbourne, we agree, are concerned about the greenwashing that happens in the aviation industry. There is now this term about used that is about sustainable aviation fuel, and we've outlined here some of the myths and debunked some of the conceptions around whether the aviation industry can really turn into a sustainable industry using SAF. And you can see here some of the points that have not been addressed by the industry, and that relate to some of the technical solutions as well, whether, for instance, electric flights or hydrogen would provide sustainable avenues. Well, that is actually quite questionable, and it's important for people to inform themselves and learn about some of these greenwashing myths that the aviation industry is spreading. The buck passing, it relates to the compliance mechanisms, but it's actually quite a setup that is being designed on purpose in order to shield the aviation industry in what we refer to as state capture. So you can see here our little flow chart about how compliance are handled. And in essence, it goes in a merry-go-round where lots of finger pointing and buck passing occurs. So eventually no one is responsible for the suffering and for the property devaluations and the health impacts and the cognitive impacts on children's learning. Aircraft noise and mental health, but also health impacts more widely. This article here talks about peer-reviewed research into high blood pressure, dementia, different heart diseases, and prolonged noise exposure has a direct correlation to the occurrence of such health problems and mental health problems. This is also backed up by our own survey here in Brisbane, where we've been over the last 2 years researching the responses from our followers and subscribers, and it corroborates some of these findings that have been published in the peer-reviewed academic literature. So this all leads really to the need for a Royal Commission. And this page here outlines why it's now crucial to really get to this highest level of inquiry, because, and this is the documentation of a series of inquiries that have already happened previously. We've never had a Royal Commission, but we've had various government inquiries, Senate inquiries at federal and state levels. And this is a documentation of this chronology of the kind of history of these inquiries that have come before us. It goes all the way back here to this earlier one in 1975, but nothing has changed. If anything, the problem has gotten worse, and the industry has become more and more sneaky in trying to capture the state and get their way around profiteering and introducing their growth aspirations without any consideration for the host cities that are hosting the airport. Misleading noise data is really at the core of what we are dealing with. You can see here some of our renderings to try and illustrate the issue. This is one here is quite eye-opening. You can see here a map from Brisbane Airport. This is the way that they portray noise contours around the 2 runways. But this is the lived experience, really, of what Brisbaneites are experiencing. So if they are presenting noise contours to you about the 3rd runway in Melbourne, do make sure that you ask the right questions, be informed and be prepared to debunk some of these myths. There is a lot of information that needs to be understood and debunked around the decibel scale, the limitations of the noise modeling software that they use, the way that they are very sneakily use averages to artificially lower noise forecasts. And we've got evidence here of that occurring not just in Brisbane, but in other airports and airport projects. And there is very systematic flaws with the aircraft noise exposure forecast system that is also at the core of what we are dealing with. So this is quite a detailed page, but yeah, do check out because I think the misleading noise data is really, really important. Air services, as it's the entity that a lot of the politicians and the airport point to as being the main one responsible, is also, I think, in the limelight here, because what we found through documents that they have released to their industry partners is that they have a two-phased approach. So whilst they are portraying to be doing community engagement, this is the actual true face of air services. You can see here that their main interest is to work very closely with the industry to prevent restrictions, to prevent noise abatements from occurring in Brisbane. They want to enable long-term growth at all costs in order to maintain their profit margin, because they are a corporation. They've been, in essence, corporatized in order to work very closely with the aviation industry. And now we're at a stage where we don't really know where the air services as an organization, where it ends and the aviation industry starts. They've been so entangled that it's very, very hard to actually make sense of whether Australia still has a regulator that looks out for communities. I'll leave you with this. You can see there's a lot of information on our website. Do check it out. It's bfpca.org.au. And I'm hoping that at some stage we will all join forces across the country in order to call for a royal commission and clean up the aviation industry. Thank you.